Welcome back to The Fallen Fruit. I am Catherine Urban.
Lynette Ramos.
Stephanie Genese.
And today is October 23rd, 2019. It is the first day of Scorpio season. And today we're offering you a very special double episode. We will upload them in two portions, but for some of our listeners, they're tuning in live, and you will get to see both portions of this episode. Our first portion is going to be connecting with the dark goddess Hekate, and we're going to get into her. And then, as you can see, if you're live, we have set up a beautiful ancestral altar. And so our second portion is going to be connecting with our ancestors in honor of Halloween, Samhain, and Day of the Dead. So, ladies, it's a pleasure to be with you today.
The pleasure is all mine.
I'm excited.
Yeah, for sure.
This is a very, very special work. But yeah, first let's talk about Hekate. So Hekate is a very ancient goddess. Her roots are believed to predate ancient Greece. Basically, she's a chthonic goddess. She is ancient. And so when the Greek culture started to come in, they basically struggled to find a place for Hekate in the pantheon. So what survives of Hekate is like honorable mentions of her. If you listen to our Persephone episode, she has the torches. Hekate has the torches. We have Hekate right here in our altar. And it was Persephone's guide to the underworld, basically, because she had the light to see.
Yeah. She is actually also responsible for helping, what was Persephone's mom's name?
Demeter. That's right.
Don't quiz me, y'all. But Demeter. So she was the one who helped Demeter find Persephone and gain contact with her again, because she had the torches, because she's also the key holder to the underworld. So her symbols are torches. Obviously, we see her holding them, keys, dogs, who are also known as like searchers and animals that typically find people, serpents as well, which I thought was really interesting, and daggers. So I'm here for all of that symbolism.
And she helps with transitional things. So as we go into the underworld, as we move into Scorpio season, she's helping us to cross into that arena. Or it's like piercing the veil, so to speak.
Yeah. And right now is the season when the veil is at its thinnest.
Indeed, it is. Yeah, we're at the time of year in the calendar where basically, if we're looking at the sun and the sun's relative brightness, the sun is basically like waning in light. It's at its balsamic phase, which is basically not named for salad dressing. It is named for balsam, the resin that is burned in ritual to connect with the ancestors, to be in reflective contemplation. And that is the correlation with our the time in our solar year, basically. Like Scorpio season, Sagittarius season. This is like the ending. This is like where the daylight is getting the smallest.
Doing a lot of shadow work, going within, especially Scorpio season being that time of year when you're supposed to do a lot of introspective work and like intense deep diving into your feelings, sexual energy, creative energy. And then that takes us into Sagittarius, which is about expansion. So you've done this work, now you're ready to kind of show it to the world.
Yeah. And ironically, like we just kind of chose a day that was convenient for us to record, but today is not only the first day of Scorpio season, but it's also the dark moon phase. So connecting with the ancestors, being in reflective space, gratitude, inward space. You can also do that on the dark moon, which happens every month. And so we're in that phase right now. And not only that, but the moon is in an area of the sky known to the Vedic astrologers that does have to do with ancestry.
Ooh.
So very, very auspicious.
See, we just knew, sort of, intuitively. But Hekate, being the goddess of magic and witchcraft, ghosts and necromancy,
Ooh.
like all of these super dark, all of the things you think of when we think of spooky season, as everyone likes to call it. But yeah, she is the goddess of spooky season, essentially.
Spooky season.
I just like saying it, spooky season.
Spooky season. Yeah, so Hekate, yeah, she is the goddess of necromancy, which is the art of divining the dead. And, you know, there's a lot of ways that humans have tried to do that in the past. You know, we see mentions of it in the Odyssey, like Homer tries to divine the dead with the help of Circe. We see it, actually Hekate appears in the Shakespeare play Macbeth. You know, he's trying to discover his fate, basically. And interestingly, I'll have to revisit it in my notes. But yeah, so basically there's a lot of ways that you can divine the dead. Like basically it was one of the main ways that you could do it is if you have like an article that belonged to the dead person, you could use that to kind of connect with their energy. To the ancients, there were people who literally would try to revive the dead, like a corpse, to actually like connect with that spirit. Today, I think it's more like when we want to divine our dead, we want to connect with them, just like their spirit, you know, and ask for signs and things like that. But there's also Ouija boards. People use those.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, so Hekate is the goddess of that practice, basically.
Yeah. So did you want to do your poem?
Oh, no, I don't have it.
Oh, okay. That's fine. So what we're going to do is, in many cases, when you do ancestral work, to summon your ancestors, you can use a bell. I like to use a rattle. So what we're going to do is we're going to just take a few moments to get quiet. And I'm just going to kind of open up the doors so that they can come in and connect with all of us. So for the people that are joining live, and even if you're joining after, you know, time isn't an issue when we're doing this work. This work can transcend that. So what I invite you to do is just get comfortable and just close your eyes and come to your breath. And what we're going to do is we're going to activate our intuition, our inner wisdom, our imagination. And I want you to envision yourself in a white pyramid of light. And this white pyramid of light is your protection, your container. Nothing can harm you mentally or physically. And just take some breaths. And I want you to bring your attention to your heart center. The heart is the portal to the unseen, to altered states. And just have a sense of love or gratitude. Just embody that energy as you focus on your heart. And then what I'd like to do is I'd like to invite only the ancestors that love us unconditionally, that are aligned with our highest and greatest good. Only those that you choose consciously or unconsciously, we're going to welcome into this pyramid of light with us. And in gratitude, we're thankful that you are here with us. We honor you. We love you. And just take a moment or two here to breathe. And what I'd like to ask on behalf of all of us is that our ancestors, we ask you to assist us in moving forward with whatever our bloodline or whatever our lineage is working through, that we bring forward and are aware and strengthen our gifts, our blessings, and that we are also assisted as we work through what pains us, what has followed us, that we are here to resolve. And I ask that this is done in the most gentle and loving way. And as we heal, as we ascend, as we expand, this love, this energy moves back and it moves forward so that the work that we do now radiates out. And just come to your heart with a sense of gratitude for the assistance that we have, the love that we have, and that we know that we're guided and protected as we move forward. And so it is, and so it is, and so it is. And just take a couple deep breaths. I want you to focus in on your root chakra, the bottoms of your feet, as you ground this energy. And then you can open your eyes when you're ready.
Thank you, Lynette. That was beautiful.
Of course.
I feel open and ready.
Now we're ready.
Yeah. So yeah, now we're in a space where we are intentionally connecting with our ancestors. I would like to call upon Hermes. He is the only Greek god who can travel both to Olympus and to the underworld. I'd like to call him for his assistance to help chariot the souls that we want to connect with our way. Also help open the portal of connection.
And we also welcome in Hekate. And I know that's pronounced differently, but we welcome her energy here. And as we learn more about you and those of us who are called to work with you, if you can make your presence known again in the most loving and appropriate way possible.
And I'd like to call in the spirits of our ancestors, again, just to let them know they are welcome. Mm-hmm. We have provided you with an abundant altar of some of your favorite things. And mementos of your life, your culture, what you loved, what connected us to you. And we understand the magic and the power that lies in our bloodline from you, because of you. And we thank you.
Yes, we do.
We do. It's an honor and a privilege to be able to do this work. You know, the lives of our ancestors were much more difficult than ours. Some arguably and definitely more difficult than others. And so it's a real privilege to be able to be in a space and time when we can gather and connect with our ancestors, because one of the main reasons that we can benefit from doing this work is that their DNA, their energy lives through us. So when we do the work to heal their story and, you know, their struggles and their triumphs carry through the bloodline. And when we can do this work to connect with them and even give them this sort of healing or closure that they need, we can heal our bloodline. We can heal the past through the present. So it's really amazing.
And inevitably heal the future.
Totally.
I know, especially I'm a mom, Lynette's a mom, and there are definitely some traditions, coping mechanisms, different things like that we don't necessarily want to keep around. But there's also some beautiful traditions and experiences and things that we do want to keep around. So sometimes ancestral work is not all about just like healing the ancestral wound. It's about celebrating, uplifting, revolutionizing the beauty of your lineage and the spiritual imprint that lives within the molecules of all of our bodies.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Yeah, and to carry things forward, it's like we can carry the traditions on and we can put our own modern spin. So it's like we can allow those things to continue to move forward. And something as simple as making a traditional dish or listening to traditional music. So those are really simple, nice ways of acknowledging that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's a very literal and strong tradition of the Day of the Dead practice, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's just kind of setting up photos of your relatives and serving them food that they like to eat. Mm-hmm. So some of the things that we have on our altar right now are things that our ancestors likely enjoyed.
Yeah. There's definitely some booze up there.
There's definitely some booze.
Yeah. I have some rice, which is obvious for, our Puerto Rican tradition. And I'm not going to go into the story, but someone told me I was in their dream last night and rice kind of there was a point that there was some discussion around that. So I thought it was appropriate. And then we have some cornmeal, which is more geared towards the native part of our culture and our ancestry. And then I've got some Goya wafers that are fire, like the guava one.
Oh, the guava.
You like the guava one? You like the guava one?
Yes,
some
those
chocolate.
are delicious.
So the sweetness too.
Yeah.
Is kind of magnetic. It kind of draws our ancestors in because, most of us like sweet foods.
Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't take so I've been really inspired by Caitlin Kopic. She creates a line of very intentional products for various uses, but in her ancestral series, she discusses how it is, there's some deities that are a little bit more high maintenance and they require a lot of ritual and, more posher altar items to connect with them and get them to work with you. But connecting with your ancestors, there aren't as many people lining up to connect with them. And so it's pretty easy to connect with your ancestors because they're not hearing from too many people on a frequent basis. So it doesn't take a whole lot of effort to really appease them and get them to want to work with you. You can serve them food, booze, some of them like tobacco, a lot of smokers down the family line. Sweet things, you want to sweeten the relations. So we have chocolate, and as Lynette brought the wafers, and we have a ritual bath going on up here, an ancestral potion. We have some honey in there to kind of sweeten relations with our ancestors. And she also mentions that once you start connecting with them, that they're going to want to connect with you on a regular basis. Mm-hmm. So it's a good idea to regularly connect with your ancestors, perhaps on the dark of the moon. Yeah.
I have my ancestral altar up all year round. So I actually took this down. This is, more of a mock-up of exactly what I have at home. And, I have the white cloth on my table. It's actually my kid's baptism blanket, which I thought was cute.
Very cute.
But yeah, just keeping it up all year round. I have it in a very special place where I have a view of the lake from my window and they face the lake. My ancestors traveled over the water to bring me here or to make my story have the setting of this place. So that was important for them to be able to see that. And, my grandpa was very into jumping off cliffs in Puerto Rico and into the water. He's a big swimmer. So I figured he would like to look out at the water. But yeah, just keeping something up year round as well. So that you pass by them every day, you say hello, you know, you give thanks, you show gratitude. If you keep that doorway open, you know, who doesn't love their family popping in and out and thinking about them joining you around the table or when there's joy in the home.
Yeah. And why might we want to connect with our ancestors? Well, they're rooting for us. They can be, you know, you connect with the right ancestors who love you. And, you know, some of them, you might not even have met them, but because you're a descendant of theirs and because you're carrying on their story and their DNA, they are rooting for you. And, you know, if you give them offerings and love and gratitude, you know, who knows what they can be doing for us on the other side.
Yeah.
And I, you know, even for me, and I know many people do this, is sometimes we look at where we are and, you know, what we could be doing or where we thought we would be. But like my grandmother, she's still alive, but she only went to the 3rd grade. So, you know, the things that we're doing are leaps and bounds beyond what some of our ancestors did. And so, like you said, they are rooting us on, and, you know, we're doing a lot of the good work, you know, and so I know that they're with us and they can see those advances that we're making. So,
Yeah. And we don't know, like, our perception of what goes on in the spirit world is limited. And so we really don't know, like, the extent of what they're able to be doing for us. I have an anecdotal story, actually. So, a little bit about my altar. The night before I got my book deal, I had a very lucid dream in which my father-in-law came to visit me, and he was the cook in the family, you know, and I knew him from growing up. For those of you that don't know, Eli's father passed away from ALS back in 2014, and we were all there for it. And it was very hard, but, you know, the victory of his life and the way that we really celebrate him is the big family gatherings. And he, you know, the Urbans went big and they cooked for everyone, you know, just like everyone came over to their house. So Eli and I are carrying that on. And it's amazing that we now have this table actually belonged to him. It was his, you know, and it's giant. So anyways, yeah, I mean, the night before I got this book deal, which literally someone emailed me from Simon & Schuster and was like, here, do you want to write this book? And the night before, this chef in the family, this patriarch, came to me in a dream. And it was so real, you know, and he gave me a hug. And then Eli doesn't dream, but then I brought Eli with me, and then they had a moment. And then the next day I got this email.
Wow.
So
it's like he was already like, ooh, let's celebrate. I know you're going to get some good news tomorrow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I've got some pretty exciting news. This is the first you're going to hear this, but Eli's dad is on my altar because I'm actually carrying his grandchild. So yeah, I'm pregnant. So I not only have my two lineages in me right now, but I have my husband's as well. So it's pretty special.
So happy for you.
Yeah. And that's beautiful to put up, you know, the baby and the child that is within you, their ancestry up on this altar, because you are connected forever. Like just when you give birth, you know, there's that still spiritual like tether. But even now it's so much more special because they are within your body, and like thinking about the spiritual imprint of molecules and DNA, and
it's amazing.
Yeah.
And when I told my grandmother, my mom's mom is still with us, and she was like so excited. Like she just couldn't handle it. And she was like, you know, the lineage carries on. That was the last thing she said. The lineage carries on.
Yeah. And it is special too. And you'll see, you know, my children are lucky enough to even have a great grandparent who's still alive.
Wow.
And yeah, she's like 95 years old from Syria. Doesn't really speak any English, but it's beautiful to watch them like connect, and they have their own language and the way that they speak to each other. And it is, yeah, I'm so excited for you to be able to experience that connection between the grandchild and the grandparent, because that is a very, very special connection that I am thankful that I get to see on a pretty regular basis. Yeah. Watching like ancestry in action.
Very special.
Yeah.
So yeah. So let me tell you a little bit about what is going on in our ritual bath over here. We have honey to sweeten relations. We have flowers to honor the beauty, because, you know, a lot of times when you hear stories, you're only hearing pieces of people's lives. And there is a tendency to romanticize, for better or for worse. But we do want to honor like the beautiful energy from it. And then what else do we put in there?
Oh, we put chamomile, which is like a soothing kind of salve type of herb. It's also too used. I remember using it when we had done sort of like a banishing ritual around the grounds of somebody's house. So it is protective as well. So calming and protective, you know, that's why drinking it before you go to sleep and a tea is really great, because then it also protects you as you transition into that state of vulnerability, that state of the dream world.
Yeah. And it's calming. So we have like calming and healing herbs in here, because we want to encourage that healing and calming connection for our ancestors, because many of them had a lot of challenge in their lives. And, you know, a lot of their struggles were our struggles too, you know, fighting for things like equality and, you know, trying to make a living for themselves and for their family. And so we want to, you know, calm, because they're in the spirit world now. It's their turn to rest. They don't have to go to work.
Yeah. It makes me think too. I remember I was part of this class that was teaching us how to connect with our ancestors and guides. And I was working with kind of money and manifestation. And I remember connecting with one of my ancestors, and she told me, we don't look at money. We didn't use money the way that you use money now. So sometimes it's like there's when we ask for this support monetarily, or if we're working on the manifestation, we have to consider that too, depending upon what our lineage is. Because again, you know, they may have been doing more bartering, you know, so True. It's a little bit different. So it's like some of us are learning how to work within this monetary system. So, you know, so for example, someone else, they may be, you know, 5th or 6th generation college graduates, right? But some of us don't have that. Some of our family members, you know, like my father was born in Puerto Rico. So, you know, I don't know if I'm considered 1st or 2nd generation, but the point is that that's why some of us are working through some of these things, because we live such stark differences, our families and our ancestors. So we're working through some of that.
Yeah. Especially when you are, say, maybe like a 1st generation American or mainlander in our case. There's these sort of like pressures, you know, your parents are like, we did this, the American dream for you. And that can feel very heavy. And some of us did not go to college, but also if you're a 1st generation college student, like you're the first person in your family to go to college, which is happening with a lot of, especially immigrant families. It's beautiful to see, you know, like them and their families in these places and these universities and these people and all of us taking up space in spaces where we weren't really welcomed. And when you're doing all of that, there is a lot of pressure. So doing something like ancestral magic, to feel like you have this spiritual team who's there to say like, yes, you can do it, you know, like do the best you can. We're proud of you no matter what. Even though sometimes we may have had some complicated relationships with our ancestors here in the physical realm, or we may have learned some things about them that were like, oh, snap, you know, like, but we also have to remember that they were dealing with struggles that we ourselves did not deal with. They were doing the best they could with what they had. So we also have to understand that struggle, and that doesn't excuse all behavior, but you know, when they're able to transcend, you have to remember they're released from that like worldly pain.
Yeah.
They're released from those chains. So,
we can find forgiveness for them too. Cause I know, for example, like my great grandmother, like, there was a story my grandmother told me, and, anyways, I don't want to really get into it, but it was basically like, I had to find forgiveness. Like she did not have birth control. She did not have opportunities to travel. She did not have education, you know? So basically like her mindset was the best that she could do with what you have. And a lot of times, you know, like, I mean, she grew up in the Depression. Yeah. So, I mean, like times were tough. So we can find forgiveness for them. And, you know, cause they incarnated into a time where it was hard. It was a lot harder than we have it today.
Yeah. In my exploration of like past life too, is most of us have been the saint and the whore, the healer and the murderer. So, some of those things are just experiences that we had to have on some level. Again, that doesn't mean to excuse it, right? Because I'm sure that the time that I was the murderer, I had to pay some dues and I had to make some corrections. But the point is that most of us, from my understanding and my experience with past life, we've been a lot of different things. And some of it is not something that we would be proud to say or because most of us want to look at what someone else has done. But in many cases, most of us have done some pretty dirty things too. So
we've played all the roles.
All the roles.
Yeah. I mean, every action, every day, we're playing all those roles. Nobody's the purest.
No.
Even
Well,
Mother
I kinda am
Teresa
kinda pure.
was. Mother Teresa was also kind of an asshole.
Yeah.
Like, let's be real.
Yeah.
Gandhi, racist.
Right.
All of those things. So there are these people who do these great things, but then you have to remember they're also released from what binds them to this world and this place and what they grew up with or the laws of the society they lived in. Now they're able to transcend. And I remember Miranda was talking about that too, like her father being, not the best person here in this physical realm, but it feels like now he's healed because he's transcended, and she feels like she's able to connect with him again.
Totally. Yeah. And, looking back through history and everything too, when times were tougher, like and even today, I mean, sometimes the most ruthless are the ones to survive. And now we can't go on to say what that means for their soul's karma, but like survival, like sometimes you have to be cutthroat. Sometimes you have to be ruthless. You can't be sharing your rations with the whole world. Sometimes you have to protect your family. And all of us who are alive right now, we are a testament of our lineage survival. My great grandmother had a sibling die at 13. I've been getting into an ancestry hole, and I'm finding a lot of people died in their teens or younger. And, in ancient Greece, it was one of the biggest blessings that one could even possibly have, was to have a child live to adulthood and even bear their own children. Like, to become a grandparent was the biggest blessing that you could possibly have. And there was even a temple, it still is there to this day, where it was to honor the infants who passed away or women who died in childbirth, because it's one of the biggest blessings to have life. And so all of us alive now, we are a testament of our lineage's ability to survive.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think, many of us who have native blood, there were times where our heart got us in trouble, and that doesn't mean it's our fault, but, we trusted, we loved, we treated everyone like our brother and our sister. And there were others that took advantage of that kind-heartedness. And so, I think that we're learning how to be discerning and who to give our love to and who to give our kindness to. And it's unfortunate that we had to learn that lesson in the way that we did. But and even, and we'll talk about this in our next episode with Hekate, but, she was even, there's witchcraft, and there is, what's the other one called? That's more, it's basically witchcraft, but your sorcery. Is what I was looking for. I'm sorry. So the point is that there were points in history that they saw fit that you had to be in a more combative state. You had to be in a more protective and aggressive state. And again, everyone has to decide what that means for them. But we are in a space where there are energies and opposing, let's just call them. So we have to be smart, and we have to be discerning.
Yeah. I mean, history has taught us that, obviously. And, like you said, finding out you still have that connection. Like, I did one of those ancestry DNA tests, and the government has my DNA. They had it before, whatever.
Yeah.
Like, if they're going to come after me, they're coming after me. I don't got to do much. But I mean, some people say those tests aren't really true, but it got down to the village that my dad is from. Like, we are Calabrian down to the bone, I guess, like 49%. So I think there's some truth, but finding true, like that percentage of native blood. Mind you, it's small. I'm also half Puerto Rican, so it wasn't going to be that big. And finding, exactly where your ancestors came from in Africa when they came from. And there's those little minute percentages, but at the same time, it's still there. Like it still exists in your blood. And, even with my children, I always try to tell them they're a quarter Egyptian, quarter Syrian, quarter Puerto Rican, quarter Italian. Cool. My ex-husband and I are both first generation. So very, very recently, these sets of people had to make this journey to this Cleveland, Ohio, so that you could be here. Like, what are the odds? And so thinking about that, trying to get them to realize the power of ancestry and lineage and bloodlines.
Stephanie, that's so fascinating because think about the history of peoples from each of those parts of the world and their relationships.
Some of the greatest civilizations. I'm just saying.
Yeah, I mean, but just that's like a lot of different places in the world. And think about the history of different nations with different nations, in their relationships and everything.
They would have never thought.
Never thought.
You're breaking all kind of rules.
Yeah, they were like, yo, that's some Romeo and Juliet stuff.
Who knows what our ancestors would think of the three of us sitting here together right now. You guys have native blood, and some of my ancestors, they came to this country in 1599. So I definitely have some oppressor blood.
I'm half Italian. Italians, the Christopher Columbus was Italian.
He was.
There is such a dagger through my heart because wanting to celebrate my Italian heritage, and my dad came from here when he was in his 20s. So I'm not very much removed, and all of our family is still there. He's the only one here. So I don't know how they really feel about that whole thing, but I know Italian Americans are Christopher Columbus, and I'm like, ugh.
No, he was a bad dude, but Italy is such a cool culture, though.
Yeah. So we're just gonna, if this were that Dave Chappelle skit, the race draft, I would be like, yo, does somebody want Christopher Columbus? You could do whatever. You could use him as a piñata, use him as firewood. I don't care, but we selling him. We don't want him no more.
So this is a little bit of a surprise for Stephanie, but Catherine and I were talking before you got here. And she had mentioned that there's some interesting points in your astrology chart because you have kind of both. Why don't you just take it from here?
Yeah, you can actually find in your birth chart. So some people are more predisposed to wanting to do the lineage work. I have a very strong 4th house in my horoscope. So that's basically I'm the most connected to my family out of all my siblings. I would say my cousin has it too. But we're the most connected to our families. My siblings live in California. They see the family a couple times a year. So anyways, I'm the strong family person. My grandma did the whole ancestry lineage, family trees. She traced some of our family back to the 1100s in England and France. Big deal. And then also on my husband's side, his mom does a lot of the lineage stuff. So if you have your 4th house really strong, you're going to have strong family ties. And the 4th house deals with the past, where you come from, your roots, your heritage. If you have the 8th house very active in your horoscope, like Stephanie does, she's got a lot of stuff going on in the 8th house. And Lynette actually has Saturn in the 8th house too. And the Saturn deals with your karma. So you may have some ancestral karma you're working through, as well as Stephanie. Stephanie has Saturn there too, among with other planets.
A lot of Scorpio.
Yeah. So that's even more deep. So if you have strong 8th house, like these ladies do, that is you're very interested in seeing what's underneath. The 8th house rules things like ghosts. It's a very complicated house. So it's where things get very, very complicated. So they may be doing some deep ancestral work with specific lineages, specific ghosts, specific stories, whereas mine might be just more general interest. Theirs is a little bit more specific.
Ooh, that makes sense. I think that also makes sense because remember I've said before, this like anecdote that for me or whatever, I've been to way more funerals than weddings
Yeah.
type deal. Like I've had so many important people in my life pass on. And so it does feel like maybe I'm just meant to kind of still exist in that world because I don't want to lose those people and those connections. Those were all people that were very, like my best friends, like my babysitter growing up who I was very close to, who was like a sister, my grandpa, that was my person, like in my family. Yeah. And so I feel that I do.
Yeah.
For
And
sure.
the eighth house is a house of ghosts and death. But it's also the work that you do as a tarot reader, like seeing behind the veil, reading the symbols. What does it mean? You know, divining the dead, divining the spirit world. And so both of you have that. And I know that like often Saturn is our karma. It's what we came here to do. And you're doing the work to go beyond the veil.
Yeah.
So very
it feels
powerful
like
stuff.
that too with my poetry, like the book I'm currently working on now, which will be out at the end of 2020, y'all. Hopefully. Knock on wood, ancestors willing.
Yeah, the ancestors are here to help you.
Yeah, but what this first book is about healing. You know, the women in my family all have complications with the womb, and Lynette and I have done healing around this. We've talked about it. She's, been the bridge between my ancestors and I to kind of deal with it. And so that's something I want to heal. And that's what a lot of what this book is talking about, and about the women of Puerto Rico, how they were guinea pigs for reproductive things, like birth control. They were sterilized. Like there were all these experiments done on those women. And so I feel like I'm carrying, and the women in my family are carrying some of that as well. So that may have been something that happened to our ancestors, or even further back, there was some pain around that, childbearing, miscarriages, abortions, all that stuff. So that feels like that's where this book is headed. And it feels like deep diving into this ancestral work is just this is how we're starting it.
Yeah. And this work is so powerful. Lynette and I were sharing before Stephanie got here about, some of the messages that have kind of started to trickle into our lives since we set the intention to do this altar and this episode. Do you want to share or no?
Yeah. I had someone who I've never met before. We're Facebook friends, and she said that she was, I was in her dream. I looked a little different. My hair was longer. I was taller, that I may have been some sort of being or an Orisha. And there was an exchange between the two of us, and a lot of grief was coming up. And she said that the outside, it was dark outside, but inside my apartment or home, it was daytime. So there was sun shining in. So there was that contrast. And so anyway, I am not, in my work, I work with these unseen worlds or these other energies, but I'm not a seer. I don't see, I just feel and I sense. And so my intuition comes in differently. So I feel like sometimes we have other people that can come in to help us to understand maybe what energies we're working with. And I thought it was interesting that this dream happened last night, the day that, the night that we were going to be doing this work, or, we're doing this work now, happened last night. So it's just sometimes we don't even know the support that we have around us, and we don't even know who we really are. I mean, we're in this flesh suit. We're working through these human things, but we don't know. She had a sense that I was an incarnate of this being. And so I think that a lot of us, I think if we really knew who we are, we would be surprised. And I think that some of our ancestors, we did have some struggles, but if we go back, if we start looking at the Egyptian time, Sumeria, and there were, according to certain information, we were giants. We knew how to manipulate energy. We were way beyond where we are today. And I think that there was some opposition that kept us from advancing. So I think that to a degree, we do come from some of our ancestors that had some struggles, but I also believe that we come from beings that are way more advanced than we can ever imagine. And I think that part of the agenda is to make us think that we are not gods, or that we are not these beings that have certain abilities and powers. And so I think it's almost like we need to know all of it. We need to know our struggles, but I think now's the time where we need to start stepping into more advanced ways of being and understanding how to use our bodies and our minds and our intentions and magic and all of that and alchemy. So I think that our ancestors can help us to tap back into that.
Yeah. That's where we're headed. Like, there's a giant 26,000 year cycle called with the Earth's North Pole kind of slowly wobbles, and it's the Hindus referred to it as the yugas. So that age that Lynette was describing, that was the Satya Yuga, which is the age of truth. Everything was true. There were no illusions. Everyone had all the abundance. We were sharing information. We had healing temples that you could freely go to. You know, you could have everything you want. And then we fell into darkness and the illusion of separateness and oppressing one another and sickness and, you know, famine. And we're coming out of that now, though. So we're so the darkness is the Kali Yuga, and we're coming out of it. We're heading back toward the Satya Yuga, but we're still in the Kali Yuga, which is why we have all the problems we have today. But we are starting to reawaken our light bodies and our magic. So it's beautiful time to be alive.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I do feel like, and we've talked about this before on the podcast, like the change is coming. Like it seems like things may be at their darkest before they're at their light. We know that kind of saying. But like people are waking up to ancestral magic. You know, I see it all over social media, on my Instagram. I also curate, you know, my timeline with wonderful people to follow. But there is a lot of ancestral magic happening. A lot of people getting in touch with their lineage, going back to these countries of origin. And it's beautiful to see the reconnection, because a lot of us in this coming to America story, immigrant story, have lost touch with that culture, or that culture was stripped from us when we were brought here unwillingly. Yeah. And so now it's beautiful to see that reclamation of, you know, indigenous spiritual practices, things like that. But also people being really intentional when they're diving into that work, you know, make sure that is something that you do have in your bloodline. Like, you know, you shouldn't be practicing Yoruban magic or spirituality if you don't have that in your bloodline. Like, it's very dangerous to get involved. Like, those gods, goddesses, ancestors, spirits, deities, they're not here to play. Don't come knocking on their door if, like, you have no business knocking on their door. And just going back into our own lineage, like, find out what resonates with you. Find out what, you know, the people who were populating the area you're from, Europe, wherever, find out what their magic was. There's a lot of beautiful folk magic in all of those countries. Dive into that work, connect with that. And one way is just to even open up the dialogue. They'll start flowing to you if you make the call.
Yeah. Totally. And, you know, in my research too, like, well, let me step back. I encourage people to, as Stephanie was saying, like, follow what intuitively and innately is in you. So, for example, in some of my research with like healing work, like with my hypnosis and all of that, they used to have temples. It's like sleep temples where they would use hypnosis. They would use psychedelics, right? And that's how they would commune. That's how they would be able to step into these more advanced states. Also, I love dancing, and I love, you know, there being a woman, we're sensual, you know, and we can use that energy, right? But, you know, back then they would have temples where they would have sex rituals. They would have, you know, they would be able to help people to have children. Let's say they had fertility issues. So they would use certain sex magic. They would use dance. And so some of these things today can be really controversial, but if we use them properly, and if that's just something that calls you, and that's just you, like I know women who can help their partners heal through sex. So it's like, you know, some of these things that just are naturally in us, I think that, you know, we should investigate. And I would, I'm going to debate with Stephanie here a little bit. So, okay. So I can't say this for sure, but some people say, and there's a book written, and I'll have to find out the book. They say that, if you notice, and talking about cultural appropriation, many, white people, Caucasian people are very drawn to indigenous work in the native way. And some people say that they are incarnating, like these native people are incarnating as white people, as a correction for karma, right? There's some things that are happening. And I tend to look at things multidimensionally. So I think that if you identify with a certain religion or way, I don't know if anyone can tell you what you should or shouldn't do. Now, again, I know that there's ways that we can be respectful and disrespectful, and I think that line is very gray. But I know people who just are naturally drawn to a certain way. Were they that in a past life? And I know Stephanie's going to say, that's some bullshit. That was past life. We've already had this conversation. So I think everyone needs to find their place.
Yeah.
Everyone needs to find their place. And, you know, we're going to have to, you know what? I have someone that I want to bring on the podcast that I want to have this conversation with, because I think that we all have something to learn. I think we have something to learn, and there's some ways we can explore this. So. Yeah. We'll have to leave that for.
I know. I think maybe because because you're a Pisces and you live between this world and the 5 other ones as well. And I think maybe me being this fire sign and this, like, I'm very politically minded, you know, I'm very much like in that work too, in the community work and of this place and time. I feel like even though I don't have a lot of earth in my chart, maybe the fire grounds me more here. But I mean, I'm open to having that conversation, but I also want people to, like you said, come with it from respect. Like, I know Catherine's practices yoga and things like that. And we've talked about, you know, there's a big draw towards it. I do yoga sometimes. It feels great. Like, thank you to the culture that invented that. And there are some things that are just going to blur into the lines of now they're a part of like American culture or this hodgepodge culture. And I think when we're all living in harmony and we can have this world peace sense, those things will blend together more and there will be less resistance. But I think as long as there's the continual oppression of those groups of people that, you know, it's like, yes, I want your spirituality, but no, you can't have this money, or no, you can't have this opportunity.
That's the issue.
That's the issue right there. And until we have that rectified, I think there's just going to be that pushback or this like claiming of like this spirituality, these practices, these traditions are ours. These are all we have left. You've taken everything from us. Mm-hmm. So I think that is the stronghold on traditions and spirituality and things like that.
Exactly. And that whole conversation about cultural appropriation really escalated around the times of like the Black Lives Matter movement and, you know, people getting shot by police, and like, not to go down that path, but like it was really, really important that we have that conversation so that we can correct. And, you know, because it's not fair that certain people, namely white people, get to just like take from other cultures without, you know, fighting or doing their part to bring equality, you know, into the workplace and into the law, basically. So we're working on it. But yeah, it's true. You know, if there's different ways to look at it, you know, you can look at, well, my spirit is ancient and I've been a lot of different things, as we were just talking about. But you can also look at it from your ancestral lineage. And so I think it's important to know that your spirit, you know, at least from my point of view, I think your spirit is eternal. It's had so many experiences, not just on this planet, but on other planets. But yeah, you also have to look at your DNA. So you have multiple storylines playing themselves out through you, different types of karma, basically.
And I think too, like even in our culture, I don't know what it is, but like I feel like we're so steeped into like the way of Christianity that we are not embracing, you know, what our ancestors did. Like, so for an example, I was in Ecuador, right? And we were, our retreat center was surrounded by this village. And so I'm in this shamanic retreat, ayahuasca, and there's people from all over the United States. Most of those people are white. So you'll like this story, Stephanie. This will play into that. But so anyway, so here are all these people from the United States practicing this shamanic way. And then everyone around the retreat center were Christians. So it's like, how is it that we came to this land, right? This indigenous land. And we came from the States practicing this, but everyone around us was steeped into Christianity. Yeah. And it made me sad because I'm like, listen, this is your way. This is the way of your ancestors. Why aren't you embracing that? And I'm not saying Christianity is bad. I think that there are different ways you can commune with the divine, and then you can do it in your own way. But it just makes me sad that I'm just going to say our people, I don't think embrace their ancestry and their culture enough.
Yeah. And like Stephanie mentioned, like, you know, I practice yoga. There's a lot of people in the United States practicing yoga, but meanwhile you have a lot of people from India who are not practicing yoga, but they're coming to the United States to become doctors and make a lot of money and become business savvy, you know, and like that is a rich part of modern Indian culture right now. So you do see a lot of crossover in today's world between cultures, and who knows why. I don't know why.
I mean, there's that packaging and selling of capitalism and the American dream. And, you know, everybody's seeing America as this golden land of opportunity and things like that, where a lot of these countries have been disenfranchised, have been driven into poverty and violence at the hand of the United States. And a lot of what our government has done as well, not to get all political, but it's, oh, sorry, Catherine was adjusting something. Thanks, tech mommy. Hi, y'all. We're back. What was I saying?
Oh, man.
I don't know, but I had another point I wanted to riff off of what you said before. Yeah. So right now, it is a very popular time to be connecting with our lineage. And, you know, as you mentioned, you see it everywhere, you know, to connect with the ancestors. It's a very popular theme in our collective right now. And one of the reasons for that is that Saturn is sitting on the South Node. And so Saturn is the Lord of Karma. And the South Node is the cosmic flush valve. It's like, let's get rid of some garbage. Let's get rid of some gunk. Let's sort through this pile of whatever. And and so it's like a big theme right now. And so right now also Pluto is in Capricorn. We've had the eclipses in Cancer and Capricorn, which has a lot to do with lineage and legacy. And so basically that's what time it is in our collective. With all the Capricorn energy being activated, it's making things very serious. So basically we entered big Capricorn energy right after the 2017 inauguration. And so it just got serious. Like it's like, we're not playing, like it's time to do some work. And so we're looking at our systems that no longer feel supportive. We're looking at things crystal clear. It's a lot of ending energy. It's a lot of death energy. And so it is inviting us to look at the ghosts, look at our past, and do a lot of corrective work, basically.
Well, our generation, our Pluto's in Scorpio. So that's another like death and destruction, transformation. That's why we're like challenging all these systems. Let's break everything down. You know, even challenging the way we view sexuality, traditions like marriage and things like that, and how we live and relationships, even how we raise our families. Like what life is supposed to be. We're challenging all of that, breaking it down, stretching these systems, you know, trying to create something that works better for us. We're transforming the way we live our life and essentially transforming our society, which is exciting.
Yeah. Okay, so why don't we share a little bit about what we brought to our altars? Do you want to start, Stephanie?
Yeah.
We'll just go down the line.
I'll start.
Yeah.
Hold on. Let me see if I remember what I brought to my altar. Okay. So I'll start over here. So actually in front of my altar, I have a line of dried marigold. If you're familiar with Dia de los Muertos and the tradition, you can see it in the movie Coco. Their little bridge is made of marigold. It is said that that's the herb that they see, and that's how they like travel to us. So it's their yellow brick road, essentially. And I have some rose petals, hibiscus, some corn, as well as Lynette was saying, to honor the indigenous. Corn also means abundance. And there's a little crystal quartz there as well to kind of clear the energy. Then I also have a little vase made by a friend of mine, Rachel Gonzalez. She owns Rag Pottery. It's amazing, but it says Te quiero on it. So I love you. A sweet sentiment. And that's holding my grandfather's handkerchief, which is embroidered with a C for his last name, Cordero. I have a Puerto Rican flag because you know me. A statue of the Virgin Mary. Yes, Christianity and Catholicism was like the oppressor's religion, but it was what my grandmother had all over the house. You know, the Virgin Mary is very big in Latinx culture. She has become kind of like this motherly symbol, this deity for us. So I always keep her on my altar as well. And I have my grandmother's rosary, which is all tarnished and super rustic looking, which I love. A photo of my grandparents, their wedding photo. So this was taken in Brooklyn, New York, where they met. Then there is a picture of my grandmother from Italy, a little wooden chicken that I got from Mexico City with all of the bright colors and painting. It reminds me of the spirits guides of the Dia de los Muertos tradition. I also have a symbol for protection, the Italian Cortano. My Italian knowledge is obviously, but it's the cornuto or whatever. It's the hands, the protection hands. A cup, an espresso cup from Italy that my best friend Alicia brought back when she went there. I got a little mink skull that is painted gold, some crystals, some booze, and an ancestors oracle card from the Brujeria Oracle deck. You can find that on Instagram, but it's the ancestors card, and it also has the symbol of the coquí, which I have tattooed on my hand. So I always love that card. Beautiful. But yeah, that's what's on my altar. Go ahead, Lynette.
I have some food offerings, as I mentioned, the rice, the Goya wafers, the cornmeal. I also have, it's like a loose incense for protection, but it has like lavender and chamomile, among other things. We also have some whiskey, some water. I have alcoholado and agua florida, which my ancestors used for healing. This was used for healing like the physical body, like headaches and fevers, but you can also use it for the auric body. The agua florida, many of us use that now, but it's like clearing. It also draws in sweetness. I have a rattle. And these things aren't specifically like, I guess, ancestral, like the tuning forks, but I just like to use the sound. And then we've got sage and palo santo. And then I've got pictures of my grandmothers. I just moved, so I couldn't find more pictures. But one of the pictures, this one here, my grandmother was like over like 105 or 6. So she was like super duper strong and powerful. And I think my father's side were more of the native blood is because she was very, very dark, but there were pictures with her with like the 2 long braids. So I feel her energy really strongly. And then we have some flowers as well.
Is that you in the picture too?
Let me see. I don't think so.
Or in the top one?
No, you know what? That's my sister.
Aww. That's my great grandmother on my grandpa's side from Puerto Rico died when she was like 106. What were they doing?
I don't know.
Man, maybe it was the alcoholado.
Right.
I'm going to take some of that home with me.
Or the booze, you know,
yeah.
Preservatives.
She was also a poet too. So like talk about ancestral lineage.
I love that.
Ooh.
Yeah.
So speaking of poets, I have some interesting news to report as I get into my altar here. So, well, first we have Hekate right here moving down the line. We have a little altar to Hekate. We're going to circle back maybe at the end and revisit her a little bit. And then, so over here, so as I mentioned, I have one side of my family where we go way, way back. We have a lot of knowledge of names and where people lived. You know, I have on my mom's side a lot of German and Swiss ancestry, and they were excellent record keepers, as well as in France too. And a lot of my biological lineage from that side is like Irish and Scottish I get from my dad. So my dad was adopted, so we don't know a whole lot about his side. My dad isn't as interested as I am as finding out. But what I do know is based on, so my mother-in-law gave me her ancestry password a week ago. And I have been building my family tree. And on my mom's side, I'm seeing a lot of familiar names that my grandparents used to tell me, and seeing that they came from different countries. So like my ancestors who came from Switzerland and then they came through Germany and then came here, they were clock makers. They made clocks. So I'm wearing a watch that my mom gave me. So this is being included here on the altar for that side. But yeah, so I'm starting to build up my dad's side. And we know the name of his birth mom. I've been starting to build the tree there. And what I found out, to get back to the poetry, is that my dad's mom and dad, or my dad's mom's parents, they were publishers.
Ooh.
And they published poetry.
Ooh.
And her name was Ril, and it was short for Rilke. And she was named after the German, because they were German, the German poet Rainer Maria Rilke. And not only was it a publishing company, and I'm finding this out right as my book is getting published. You know, I just got my first shipment of books this week. They're awesome. But yeah, I'm just finding that like that connection lives through me. Like, what are the odds that my great grandparents were publishers?
Yeah.
And they had a publishing company called Prometheus Press.
Ooh.
And they had a book called No Eclipse.
Oh.
And so I have a poem from the poet that she was named after. And Rainer Maria Rilke was the poet, and he wrote a lot about death. So I'm just going to read this quick little one. There is death in life, and it astonishes me that we pretend to ignore this. Death, whose unforgiving presence we experience with each change we survive, because we must learn to die slowly. We must learn to die, for that is all of life, to prepare gradually the masterpiece of a proud and supreme death, of a death where chance plays no part, of a well-made beatific and enthusiastic death of the kind the saints knew to shape, of a long-ripened death that effaces its hateful name and is nothing but a gesture that returns those laws to the anonymous universe which have been recognized and rescued over the course of an intensely accomplished life. It is this idea of death which has developed inside me since childhood, from one painful experience to the next, and which compels me to humbly endure the small death so that I may become worthy of the one which wants us to be great.
Oh, I love that.
Me too.
Yeah. And then it says that line about the small deaths. Can we, because I was talking about that in the last one. We were talking about the death tarot card, like little deaths every day. I'm going to need a copy of that.
Yeah. This was from his journal. This was like, he was a poet and wrote poetically. So this was from his journal, or letters that he wrote. I guess he wrote a lot of letters about death. I guess he dealt with it a lot. But he was a prolific writer on the subject. And so it's just these weird connections that have been coming into my consciousness, like since we decided to do this altar. So yeah, I'm learning a lot, and I still don't know anything about my dad's biological father, but I am hoping to learn. And I'm hoping that by building this tree, and they have my DNA, they have my dad's DNA, I'm going to find out. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. And so my intention today is to ask for my ancestors for support in finding this knowledge, because there's a chance he's still alive. So if you're out there, I would like to know, I just want to know the story. I'm not looking for anything more. If, I'm open, but like, I really just want to know. So the other ones I have on my altar here, I have Eli's father, and I have my mother's grandma. She was a Leo. She was supposed to be really, really fun. I never met her, but I hear lots of wonderful stories of my mom going to visit with her. And I also have a photo of my dad's mom, because my biological grandmother, because she lived a very tragic life. And so I'm trying to honor her. She gave birth to my dad at 16, and she died when she was 17. So I just imagine that the teenage struggles that I dealt with were pretty similar to hers. And so I'm just trying to like connect with her and, allow her to be heard, And what else do I have? Oh, I have Garfield.
Oh yeah, Garfield.
My kitten, and I have one of his whiskers because as Hekate suggested, have an object that belonged to them. So I have the collar and the whisker. So Garfield, my little kitty on the other side, he did send me that whisker after he passed. I asked him for a whisker and he sent it to me. So he sent me 3 actually.
Ooh, the power of 3.
Such a magical number too.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's crazy. Like, oh yeah, Scorpio season. So my grandma was a Scorpio.
Ooh.
Yeah, she was like Scorpio queen. She was a bad ass. She was like the oldest of 12 kids. And her mom died very young, so she was kind of like the second mom in command. But yeah, so shout out to her on this Scorpio season. I don't know when my paternal grandmother's birthday was, but I know her name was Annunziate, which is Italian for Nancy, which is my mom's name.
Ooh.
So that's cool. And I only met her once. I went to Italy when I was 10 months old.
Wow.
But I would have loved to like know more about her, know more about her story, her struggles, raising 4 kids alone in the Italian countryside because my grandfather died when my dad was like very, very young. So,
well, if you're curious, Ancestry has a lot of information. If you go on and you build a tree, you will find that people have uploaded pictures of gravestones, birth certificates, death certificates, marriage dates. So you can find out all this information. I mean, there's no reason I should know that like a great grandparent's birthday, but I have it. Like if I want to know it, I just go on there and there's information.
Ooh, yeah.
So you could find out.
I'm into it.
Yeah. All right. So what are we feeling? Should we finish with like a little bit more about Hekate, or what are you feeling?
Yeah, we can round it out back down to our girl Hekate. We're up. Crossroads are up here, right? Before we go down? I don't know. I'm not good at underworld geography.
So, yeah. So, well, I just found like an interesting piece about her, so you mentioned that she had like dogs who would like sniff things out. She also had a cat, like a weasel. It was like a polecat.
Polecat. Yeah.
Which is like a ferret, basically.
That's cool.
Yeah.
She seems bad, like torches, keys, ferrets, dogs, serpents. She was just coming up like, hey, you ready to go?
Yeah, but so yeah, she had like all these different tools, and like one of the tools that we can also use to connect with the spirit world is hallucinogens, right? So you find that in the ancient world. You have different things like nightshades, mandrake, belladonna, jimson weed. These were used in salves and potions to kind of like open ourselves up to the spirit world, basically. And those were specifically used to divine. In the Arabic practices of the medieval era, they would use astrology to choose auspicious times to connect with their ancestors. Similarly, like we just kind of did today by accident, but they would legitly elect the day, the hour, all of that. So yeah, also like another thing I kind of wanted to mention was that like a lot of like the practices that have been popular like within the last 100 years, those came from a movement in like the 1800s called the spiritualist movement. And they were the ones who like popularized the Ouija board and the seances and channeling, and like even like the ancient Quakers, well, not ancient, but like a few hundred years ago, like they call them the Quakers because they would quake. Like they would like, you know, like when you see like people on TV, like,
oh, like the shaking and the speaking in tongues and all that.
It comes from that. It comes from that. So like, that's interesting. And for some of our listeners, if you go to Lilydale, New York, it's like only a few hours away. It is a town of psychic mediums. It's a 3-hour drive. I've driven there. You have to be a psychic medium to live there.
Oh.
And so you can go and like get a reading, and they do like different rituals and things like that. Automatic writing was also a way that people used to like connect with the dead.
Ooh, I want to try that.
And I also learned that Abraham Lincoln's wife held seances at the White House.
Yeah.
Very
I can see
nice.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, there's definitely some, you know, when you talk about back medieval or like whatever times, but we were talking about those herbs as well. Like there was that salve that women would put supposedly on the end of broomsticks and like masturbate with those, and they would cause hallucinogenic effects or for them to hallucinate or see things. And that's when people were like, oh, witches. And that's where the whole like flying on your broom comes from. That's dope. I wonder if that still works.
Asking for a friend.
Asking for me. I don't care.
Circle back and let us know.
Circle. But they had wooden brooms. So like, I don't know. I don't want to stick wood.
Yeah, I'm not feeling that.
No.
Yeah, they weren't polished like today's.
No.
No.
I'll just take like some mushrooms and be on my way.
But yeah, I mean, like back in the day, like people didn't have like Google or whatever. Like you couldn't just look stuff up on the internet. So like one thing you would try to do is like divine the dead or like try to bring them back and try to connect with them to get information about the future, about current situation in your life. Like give me the answers.
Yeah. I mean, there is that practice of like digging up the human skull and using that as like a portal to speak to spirits and divine with the dead. Do not recommend that. We are not co-signing that. But I know that is when people hear the word necromancy, that's typically what they think of, or like sort of like sexual activities with the dead, which necrophilia. Okay, so that's not necromancy. Necromancy is like the dinner before the fucking, before the necrophilia.
We're not
It's a gateway drug. Necromancy is a gateway drug.
So
we are not endorsing either of those, but setting up an ancestral altar now we do co-sign on.
So yeah, and Hekate, she was the goddess also not only of ghosts and necromancy and death, but also of the crossroads. So people would set up altars to Hekate at like places where the road would cross off, because again, it's like, which direction should I go? Which way do I go? So you could ask Hekate, and she was there with like the lantern and everything. She was like the way shower. So you could ask her. The other thing is that ancient depictions of her, she just has one head, but as we get a little bit more modern into her, she has three. She's like the triple goddess.
Yeah.
And it's because not only is she representing the triple goddess of the moon, so she's like a moon goddess, but also because she can see in three different directions. So she has that past, present, future, and like physically for like travelers, she could have that sight for them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that. The moon goddess and the and entrances. So that's the other thing, is that there's a stone called like Hekate, which is pillars. When you see a lot of Greek temples and ancient temples and, you know, things like that, they always have those pillars in the entranceway. Even the Egyptian pyramids, there's those really big pillars, because those are called like Hekate because she was also the goddess of like entryways. So being, you know, past, present, future, you know, thinking about babies and things like that, the entryway. So even working with her maybe in, I know that's not her realm, but like labor and delivery, because there is an entranceway that happens.
It actually is.
Yeah.
She's like a midwife of entering like different. And as Lynette mentioned, like she has the keys, like she can literally open the doors.
Yeah. She got the keys.
So yeah. The other thing about Hekate that I learned is that she appears when the ebony moon shines. So again, reiterating the dark moon. The other thing I read is that she is protective of the vulnerable, the warriors, the hunters, the herdsmen, children, and childbirth. But she's not protective in like a nurturing, mothering way. Instead, she can exact vengeance upon those who cause harm to these people. So it's like divine retribution, basically. And basically she can decide who's like worthy of her protection. So not everyone is worthy of Hecate's protection according to myth.
Okay.
Oh, maybe we are because we built her an altar, hopefully. Like,
Yeah.
just sounds like we have a lot of things in common. Hekate, I think we'd be friends. So,
Yeah, please protect
me.
us. Okay, so anything else we want to add before we wrap up?
I wanted to add one more thing when we're coming back to like ancestral work and being an artist. And I know there are a lot of people who, you know, dance in both of those realms, spirituality, creativity, the arts and things like that. But making art related to the stories and lives of our ancestors can deepen our connection to them. So letting them come through in your stories, if you're a writer, in your poetry, in the visual art that you make as well, looking back at some of the symbolism, just food, traditions, clothing, colors that were really important to them or really big in their traditions and things of that nature. Incorporating that into your artwork really provides this connection. And that's a lot of the times when I see artwork that does that, or I read poetry or stories that do that, there is that sense of like celebration, connection. That's how we keep these stories alive. That's how we learn who we are. So to all my artists out there, I invite you to create in that realm, create the ancestral altar, ask them for guidance and for help when you're maybe feeling blocked or you need some inspiration. Like, look no further than your own lineage.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I feel that when I dance. Like, I could feel like sometimes I'll dance like to like a traditional song or whatever the case, and I do movements that I don't normally do. So it's like I know something else is happening. And it's interesting because many people in our culture that are really tied to like Catholicism or Christianity, they don't even want to do those dances because they're
I'm
like
trying to do all those dances.
because they think that that's like evil, which you know, that's
like
a whole other story.
Yeah. But yeah, when you're right, when you hear that music, it's like, it takes over you and you're like, this isn't coming from just me.
Yeah.
Anything you want to send us off with?
No, I think maybe we can just close our circle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe just reconnect for a moment.
Sure. So I just want to, on our behalf, just thank our ancestors and Hekate for being here with us and working with us, and that those of us that feel resonant or called to do this work more deeply, that we can receive a message or a sign or a nudge in one direction or another, so that, you know, our left brain, our mind can kind of get on board and get some sort of just confirmation that we're on the right track. So just in gratitude. Thank you.
Thank you.
Gracias.
Thank you so much for joining us today for this very special live episode of The Fallen Fruit. You can connect with us on Instagram at The Fallen Fruit Podcast. Please subscribe to our show and please spread the word. If you know any other of your friends that might be interested in tuning in to our content, please spread the word. It's very much appreciated. And anyone have any events that you want to share real quick?
I don't. Still reading at Coven. Yeah, just I don't even know what event. I've been so busy. It's all a whirl, which I'm thankful for. So thank you, ancestors. But yeah, just follow me on Instagram at st.ginese. I post mostly what I'm doing, probably fucking everything I'm doing on there. So you can keep up and see events and all that good stuff on there.
Awesome.
Yeah, so I want to shout out Joda and Pop Life.
Yeah.
They're going to be having their grand opening, and I think it's on the 1st. And so if you guys want to look Pop Life up, actually Joda will be a guest on an upcoming episode. So I just want to shout them out. His team, Jessica, Denise, Tabitha, they're all super amazing, heart-centered people, bringing high vibe energy to the city of Cleveland. And so, yeah, just check them out. And if you're available, come to their grand opening.
It is such a cool space, you guys. Like,
Yeah.
even just you roll up on Waterloo and you can't miss it. It's a big mural. It's like a big bank that's been taken over by a mural
I call it
artist.
the Technicolor like dream house.
Yeah, I'm gonna let him talk about the artists, but just to give you an example of like the intention, they have crystals underneath their floor. Okay, so just all of the details that went in of creating this high vibratory place, it's just impeccable. The artist, the design, it's beautiful.
Yeah, I can't wait to hear more about it. Yeah, so I am still doing my planetary intro series. The recordings of the classes will soon be available for sale on my website. In the meantime, if you want to roll through, by the time this airs, there will be one more planetary class. If you want the recordings of the first two, just email me in the meantime. And the other really big thing I have going on is my book comes out on November 5th. Tuesday, November 5th. And we are going to be having a book release party at Coven on Saturday, November 16th. I know Stephanie will be there reading tarot cards. I hope Lynette can be there too. And yeah, we're just going to be hanging out. I'm going to be selling books and signing them. And there will definitely be some delicious beverages to sip on and some snacks. So just come through and hang out, we'd love to connect with you. So come out.
Yeah.
So I know that'll be in the evening, but I'll probably be hanging out there during the day. I think it'll start around 6.
Oh, cool.
Yeah,
Nice.
6 or 7. So anyway, well, thank you so much for listening today and tuning in with us. And we will catch you next time.
Bye.
Peace.